We're live, and it looks like we are live. Damien, thank you again for joining me today. For those of the people on the call who aren't familiar with you, I know you're a legend in the industry.
God.
Some of my clients may not know what a powerful and influential person you are. So maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you so much for having me. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Damien Greathead. I'm one of the vice presidents here at Receipt Bank, and I've been with Receipt Bank for about 5 years, helping our 8,000 accounting and bookkeeping partners around the world utilize Receipt Bank with their clients. So Andrew is a Receipt Bank partner, and so basically my objective is to help Andrew utilize Receipt Bank with his clients, help Andrew help his clients utilize Receipt Bank and do things like protect clients from fraud. Prior to joining Receipt Bank, actually worked in an accounting firm, which I'm not sure if you know, Andrew. So I know the debits and credits. I know the pain of document collection, source document management. I know the pain of an IRS, CRA type audit. So I know the back office functioning for an accounting office, whether that's an accounting office in a public accounting practice like yours, Andrew, or alternatively the accounting office of businesses around the country and around the world. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm delighted to be here today, not to talk about Receipt Bank, but I think quite importantly, talk about protecting yourself from fraud. Some simple steps each and every one of us can take will definitely strengthen your internal controls and help you guard against it. So Andrew, I'm really excited about today.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us because, you know, we're seeing the amount of fraud that is increasing with small businesses at pretty staggering and alarming rates. And it's a lot of people sort of think that, you know, these small businesses aren't susceptible to this. But in fact, it looks like it's actually increasing at a higher rate with smaller businesses than it is with virtually any other type of business. And so I think it's really interesting to talk about how we can use technology to help mitigate that and protect against that fraud. So I'm really interested to hear your take on it. And of course, to share with our clients the value of Receipt Bank, which is just one tool that we can use to help mitigate and protect against this risk. But it's a tool, as you know, that I'm really passionate about because I think in addition to protecting against fraud, it's a huge time and value add for our clients, the amount of time that it saves people. And, you know, I was sort of, we've had this conversation, I was shocked by how people aren't recognizing what an impact this is. And I guess because I come from the accounting background, I come from that biased background of knowing how painful this is and actually having used the tool, being able to see what an impact it can have for the transparency, the accountability, as well as the ease of use. Like, a way that this technology has changed our lives, that we can now walk around the world, take a picture of a receipt, roll that into a ball and throw it in the garbage, and we've got better documentation than we've ever had before. And of course, today you're going to talk to us about, over and above that time savings, how this can be used as an internal control to help protect and minimize risk as well. So excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, well, Andrew, I mean, you said something interesting there, and obviously you and I are in it day in, day out from the accounting side of things, but you said small businesses are a growing target of fraud operations. We'll talk through some different types of fraud, but some stats that I found as I was doing some research to prepare for this presentation: Canadian businesses suffer an estimated $3 billion in fraud losses annually. So this is from Henry So. He's a CPA and a former RCMP investigator. But I think, to your point, small businesses are a target because they previously didn't have access to the same systems, the same technology that larger organizations did. Whereas now with Receipt Bank and a whole host of other apps, we can put these types of tools in the hands of small business owners. And there are a whole host of benefits to Receipt Bank, particularly from an accounting standpoint, particularly from going paperless, making sure that we're capturing all of that outgoing HST to minimize the tax liability. And we can talk about plenty of those, Andrew. I know we've only got half an hour, whereas today I just wanted to focus on helping your clients get their head around this idea of fraud, because a lot of small, medium-sized business owners, they think it won't happen to me. I know my employees. I know what's happening, but it does happen, and we've got to be aware of it. And if you think, what is the average cost of fraud? We're looking at about $150,000 per incident. And Andrew, you're in public accounting. You probably see this often. We see it as well, but we see it all the time. When the bookkeeper was responsible for paying suppliers, times got a bit tough for them. They started to pay suppliers twice. We've seen far too many cases where business owners have put a lot of trust, but not a lot of systems in place within their internal team. And before we know it, we're at $150,000. And it's not the case of it's $150,000 that happens tomorrow. It's the small incremental parts that absolutely add up for this fraud. And this was another interesting thing about this idea of it won't happen to me. I'm a small business owner. I know my people. The same report to the nations on occupational fraud and abuse in 2016. For small business, on average, it was $150,000. For nonprofit and religious organizations, the median loss per fraud incident was $100,000 and $82,000 respectively. If any of your clients, Andrew, are nonprofits, obviously you have this reason for being, that raison d'etre, and so you think the best of the people in your organization, but looking at these stats means that we're all susceptible to it, and we can put some simple things in place to protect and guard ourselves against that. So that's why I think this is really important. I think it's really important that business owners, nonprofit executive directors put in place some simple systems and some simple technologies to protect themselves. Yeah. And in doing so, they'll also enjoy a whole host of other benefits with Receipt Bank.
Yeah, I know we unfortunately had a client who had gone through fraud. And oftentimes what happens with fraud is it's actually usually the people that you trust the most and the people that are closest to you.
Yep.
And we had this one situation, and he had a credit card that was stolen and used, and he sort of thought that was the end of it. And I sat down and I talked to him. I said, like, look, we need to start putting in some internal controls for your business, because this is an issue. You know, the things that we're doing with your business, and this was quite a large business. And he's like, oh no, you know, it was a one-time thing. We know who it was. It was this employee's brother. He's, you know, got some issues, and we've identified it. You know, we're good. We don't need to put in internal controls. Well, skip down the road a few months later, and it turns out it wasn't the brother of that employee. It was actually that employee. And over the course of the time, he had actually embezzled like close to $100,000 in a matter of months, because those internal controls weren't in there. He was doing things like duplicating invoices and paying vendors that weren't actually performing work.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you know, the typical problems that you see when it comes to fraud. And he just assumed, because this person was his most trusted person, it couldn't possibly be them. But I think that people who fall into this false sense of security that, oh, I'm a small business, it's not important to me. Oh, the people who are working with me are family. I can trust them. They're close friends. I know them really well, are the people that often fall victim to this type of fraud, because they're just assuming that trust factor is all they need to have in place. And maybe make the assumption that putting in internal controls can be costly and time consuming. And I think that hopefully you're going to show us today that it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on this slide here, Andrew, one of the key things that I want to say is fraud doesn't discriminate. So this is out of the FTC down in the United States. And so the number of people reporting fraud within the age group of 20 to 29 was 3 times higher than in the age of 70 to 79, which I thought was really interesting. One thought for that might just be maybe younger people are okay with putting their hand up to say, I was defrauded. But interestingly, in the older age brackets, the actual loss was significantly higher than in the younger age bracket. So key thing there is age doesn't discriminate. And Andrew, we've got plenty of stories. One of our partners, it was about $250,000 worth of fraud. I mean, I know your firm, you do a lot of outsourced accounting for your clients. One situation happened where the internal bookkeeper had retired. And so the organization decided to outsource that accounting and bookkeeping work to their accounting firm, just like yours. And the accounting firm went in and rebuilt the books for the last 6 months. And they found exactly what you mentioned there, Andrew. There were, because Receipt Bank will put the source document, so we'll put the bill, we'll put the receipt alongside every single transaction in QBO. What they found when they went through this process was 50% of the transactions were missing the source document. So the receipt, the invoice, the credit note, or whatever it was. And then they went in and investigated. And over the course of 2.5 years, this bookkeeper that had been to family barbecues, that had been to family christenings and holiday parties, etc., they had defrauded the organization of about $250,000. And they did that because there weren't simple steps in place. Certainly don't want to get the audience scared. I just want to bring it to people's attention, and then with some simple steps, we can guard ourselves against fraud.
Well, and even, for people who are like, well, I don't have an outsourced bookkeeper, I'm doing this myself, it's only me. I mean, even for the ability to be able to validate and cross-check against identity theft, which is a big thing. There was just a big, huge massive identity loss or leak or whatever it's called with Desjardins up here in Canada. Millions of potential people who are at risk. And what's happening is these people are going out and obviously using your identity, using your credit cards, and making purchases, and being able to have this reconciliation of your bank statements and your credit cards, which so many people use to do their bookkeeping these days, against the actual source document. Oh yeah, that's what I purchased. Because I know, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself. And I know, a month later, I'm not sure I remember every single purchase I've made on Amazon.
Yeah.
And being able to go through and make sure, okay, those are the purchases I made, they line up, they match up, is a great way to help make sure that someone isn't actually gone out there and stolen your identity and using your information to make purchases on your behalf.
Yeah, and Andrew, you and I were talking, as we were setting this up, we were talking about another example with one of your clients, very simple, and we'll give the restaurant the benefit of the doubt, but they'd gone in and charged a different amount on the tip line. Yeah. And what had happened was the transaction came into QBO via that enabled bank feed. Receipt Bank sent the receipts and all of the data into QBO, but they didn't match. And the reason that they didn't match was because the totals were different. And when we went in and investigated, the restaurant had actually upped the total amount based on what they thought the tip was. Again, we'll give the restaurant the benefit of the doubt, but I want those checks and balances in place, and the technology allows us to do this. So obviously that's a $10 tip. But if we don't have the systems in place, we're going to miss the $10 tip, we're going to miss the $100, we're going to miss the $300, and this is how it starts to add up over time. But here we've got a couple of common types of fraud. We'll be focused on billing fraud and expense reimbursement fraud and how we protect against those. But check fraud, I'm not sure if any of your clients are still using checks, Andrew, but that's an internal control step right there. Eliminate paper checks and payment. What do you use for payments, Andrew? What are you recommending?
We would probably, of course, my mind goes a blank right now. What's the Canadian one that we've got up here?
There's Pluto, and then there's Pluto's one that comes to mind.
Pluto.
Yep.
Sorry, I was drawing a blank here.
No, but back in the day, Andrew, when we opened Receipt Bank, I got a book of checks, and I had to sign the top 5 of them and put them in the top drawer when I went traveling to a conference. Whereas now with something like Pluto, all of that's electronic. It's all mobile enabled, so I can approve the source documents. I can see the bill, I can approve it, and I can, and as you know, put up an approver to say, look, this is $500. So we've got to send it to the other partner for approval. But anyway, check fraud is a big one. Payroll and time fraud. if your clients, if any of your staff are checking in, have they ever called a friend to say, look, I'm running a bit late, can you clock me in? Have they ever said that they're on the location, but the client has, or the customer has said, no, they're not? Again, we'll give our staff the benefit of the doubt. But what are some of the time tracking systems that you're recommending, Andrew, to guard against that fraud? T-sheet? Yeah.
T-sheets, right, with that geolocation and being able to see.
Again, all on the mobile phone. Yep.
Yeah.
And then the last one there is cyber fraud. Now that's obviously the phishing and clicking on emails and whatnot, and that's outside of my my purview, I would say. But just be aware of it and start to put policies in place in your business. Might just be you, but as your business grows, we want to make sure that our team are aware of how to spot any of these items of fraud and how to prevent any of these items of fraud.
And again, speaking of the cyber fraud, one of the big things and one of the reasons that I'm such a big believer in the cloud is that if you are a victim of cyber fraud and they put a ransomware on your computer and they're not giving you access to your computer until you pay them, $30,000 or whatever it is, you just basically fold up your computer, throw it in the garbage.
Yep.
Because your data's not on it. And in fact, the way we run our business, we run Citrix terminal services. Everything's stored at a data center that is backed up and redundant Canadian data center here with a provider that we work with. And so literally, if something happens to this physical machine, to me, it's a $300 machine. I fold it up, I throw it in the garbage, and I go get a new one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's critical. And here are some ways in which your clients can guard against fraud, protect themselves against fraud. It's important to have policies in place so that all employees, the entire team, the entire organization knows what are the payment policies, what are the reimbursement policies. We require 14 days advance purchase of travel, for example. Let's document all of these things to make sure that our team is perfectly aware that we have policies in place to protect us against fraud. So these internal controls. Next one that's critical is a separation of duties. And so that's the people that are receiving the bills can't be approving the bills. The people that are processing the expense reports can't be approving the expense reports. Because I'm the employee creating my expense report, I should not be the one approving my expense report. And I think even if it's two partners in business, there can be a separation of duties and some checks and balances in there. And then last but not least, let's get some technology working on our side. As we said before, needn't be expensive and needn't be complicated either. But I think with these three working together, we can really guard ourselves against fraud. If we get to technology, and we're going to jump in and have a look at this immediately. And Andrew, I'd recommend if people want this this slide here, feel free to share it with them. But we want multi-user permissions because we want to see what Damien submitted, what Andrew submitted, but also I don't need to see, or I shouldn't see, what Andrew submitted. But you, Andrew, as the owner, you can have visibility over everything. So multi-user permissions is really important, and different access levels.
And that audit trail that goes along with that multi-user.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the things that you might see a lot of this, Andrew, that a lot of people just set up the administrator user, but give administrator user to 3 and 4 different people to access it.
Yeah.
I can track that.
Yeah. And try to save $1 or $2 and ends up biting them in the butt. Yeah.
Duplicate detection. So particularly for that expense reimbursement, we've seen that a lot where I put in a particular, maybe not an Uber receipt, but it might be a meal receipt, might be a hotel receipt, expecting to be reimbursed, expecting to slip it through the cracks. So we want to make sure the technology is able to pick up things like duplicates. Currency conversion. If your team, your staff are coming cross borders, we want to make sure that we're picking up the appropriate currencies and converting that back. Obviously, we want to be mobile enabled. And the reason why we want to be mobile enabled is we want to make it as simple as possible for our staff, for our back office processes. We don't want to be complicating things, and we certainly don't want them to be putting their expense reports together on the last Sunday of every month as they fill out an Excel spreadsheet.
And we want the business owners to be able to access this information wherever they are, whenever they are. Like you talked about, is being able to have access to this so you can approve bills and you can approve payments, whether you're on vacation or whether you're up at the cottage or whether you're, at a conference, whatever the case might be. You want to be able to have the technology with you wherever you go. Also, again, speaking specifically to the benefits and the power of Receipt Bank, having the ability to take a picture of a receipt immediately when you get it is so powerful because, I look at my dad as a perfect use case. My dad's always been good about keeping receipts, but how does he keep the receipts? Stuffs them in his pocket, and at the end of the day, they come out crumpled. Some of them are readable, some of them aren't. It's just a different experience when you're able to reach out, use your mobile phone, and run your life with this, which is such a powerful tool and such an important factor of what Receipt Bank can do for people.
Yeah, and Andrew, I've just opened up the user interface here so that we can share that, so we can give some context to some of those things that we were talking about. There's a whole host of bells and whistles and features in here, ladies and gentlemen, but I just want to take you through some of the things that we've been touching on. Here is the, particularly because I know, Andrew, your attendees, they can sign themselves up for a free Receipt Bank account to kick the tires, can't they?
Absolutely. So everyone on this call will get a free account if you don't already have one. If you do have one, have any questions about how to use it, please feel free to reach out to us. I think Damien's going to do a bit of a walkthrough to show you about some of the power. We've done some demos in the past. We're also putting together, which with the help of some of your content, Damien, we're actually putting together some content of how to use the tool and how to make it an everyday part of your life. So you guys have a great set of tools that we've got access to, and we're going to be sharing that content out. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that or getting some help guides, getting some quick sheets about how to get information in here, just let me know and we'll be happy to share that with you. But everyone on the call is getting a free account.
Fantastic. So folks, let me show you some of the things that we've been talking about in the last session, the last part of this session. You can see here, this is your inbox. So all of your items are now coming into one central location. We can see here who submitted them. So I can see Andrew, I'm an administrator, so I can see everyone. However, Andrew would only see his submissions if he had that basic level access. But I can see everyone, I can see all of the submissions. I can see the totals. I can see the tax. So now all of a sudden I start to get visibility into what's happening in my the expense side of my business. So how do we get information into Receipt Bank? Click up here to add items. And we've got a whole host of ways to get information in. First and foremost, if you've got a lot of paper in the back office there, run it through a high-speed scanner, click that multiple items button and drag and drop it in. Receipt Bank will get to work splitting it all up and then processing and organizing. If you're getting any receipts via email, Uber receipts, for example, you can create these at receiptbank.me addresses. So rather than it coming into your inbox, you can send it to this inbox. So this at receiptbank.me address, or alternatively, you might forward that Uber receipt directly to this address. So in my smartphone and my inbox, one of my contacts is my expenses. So I just type to expenses and that automatically populates with this at receiptbank.me address. My favorite and most popular is the mobile app. And we're going to go live here, Andrew. So this could go horribly wrong, folks. So bear with us just while I share. I've got to stop sharing.
Demo gods are hopefully with us.
And then I'm going to enable my smartphone. And you can tell that is me. Got married in the spring, and Marriott has just emailed me about something. But first and foremost, what I really like is you can send a text message to your team members. So send a text message to your staff because you want them to get up and running with Receipt Bank. So as you can see, our business is called Ontario Industries. That's going to step you through the download from the appropriate app store and is going to prompt them for a password. Then all we're going to do is we're going to open the app. We're going to click on the camera icon there, and I've got a receipt, giant, a grocery store. So I'm going to take a photo of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the right top button, top right there, because I want to make a note here. So this was team lunch following end of Q2. And so this is where you're going to get that information from your team. So in our policies, if we're taking a customer out to lunch, we'd want to make sure we've grabbed that. If it's associated with a particular project, particular class or location, we'd want to capture all of that here. And that's really important that we can do that from the mobile. So this is where our policies are really important to define those. But we're going to hit save, and then we're going to submit that for processing. I can now discard that receipt because it's been captured.
Yeah, and this is I think one thing that's really important for people to know is that this is a valid source document. As long as it's legible and reproducible, you can actually print these out and provide these to CRA. I mean, Damien, you and I both know of countless stories where other accountants and bookkeepers have been able to use Receipt Bank as a way to deal with audits, to be able to provide that information that auditors ask for. Because typically what happens is they'll either come in and they'll say, okay, I want a specific account. I want all the transactions for your automobile. I want all the transactions for your professional
entertainment.
Yeah. Exactly. And for this time frame. And you can go into Receipt Bank and you can actually say, okay, find all the transactions for this classification in this date range, and you can get it out of the report that you can just give and provide to CRA. I mean, it's such a powerful, amazing tool for being able to deal with CRA. And I can tell you from my experience as an accountant dealing with CRA, when you're able to provide that level of documentation to CRA like that, that turns them away quickly. They don't dig deeper. But if you're like, oh,
everything.
Exactly. You're like, oh, I don't know if I have that receipt. Let me see what I can find. Oh, here's a credit card statement. Here's a bank statement. Here's a receipt that's half chopped up or half illegible. What would be your reaction as the auditor? You're like, I'm not so sure about this. Let me dig a little bit deeper.
And let me dig a little bit deeper. Yeah. And let's go over and show you that momentarily, Andrew. But the last one I want to show here on ways to get information in, invoice fetch. So you can connect to Amazon, which has all of the line item detail of your purchases, connect to the utility companies, connect to Rogers. So we can connect Receipt Bank to those suppliers, and we'll go and get them for you, bringing it all into one central location. So that's a huge time saver there. But
and I'm sorry to interrupt again. I get so passionate about your product. But one of the big things, again, here that's huge about connecting live to those direct downloads is you can connect to your bank. And you can pull the bank feeds. I can tell you how much time that we spend on clients going back and forth with them on, hey, we need all 12 bank statements here. Can you please provide them to us? You can have them connected here in Receipt Bank, and it will pull those accounts for you automatically and download those PDFs. Yes, it's not going to create a transaction in your QuickBooks file, which would be done automatically by the bank feed there. But we need that PDF to do the reconciliation. And now I can go into your Receipt Bank account and I can pull that bank transaction anytime I want, just from the feed that you've got directly here. So sorry to interrupt, Damien.
No, I know what you mean. But most importantly now, everything is in one central location. It's not in folders. It's not in people's wallets. It's not in trays, etc. Everything now is sitting here in your inbox. And let's just show that advanced search. So we clicked over here. We might just search for a particular, we could search on the category. So this is where we might search for meals and entertainment. Where am I looking for a category? Currency. There we go. I could go for meals down here and do a search on all of the receipts associated maybe in Q2, maybe in 2016. All of that information is now available, and we could then select all of those items, and then we could download that to a CSV, or we could export it to a PDF if the CRA did come knocking. Let's go and have a look in one of the items. Here we've got a restaurant receipt. And as you can see, I've got the source document on the left-hand side. Receipt Bank's gotten to work recognizing all of the information, the HST, the GST and the PST in this particular example, or this one's from Quebec actually. So all of that's taken care of. We can review that, decide where we want to send it. Do I need to send it to an expense report to reimburse one of our employees? Do I send it over to an enabled credit card feed within QBO? I make that decision once I've had the review of it. But the key thing here is everything's now coming into this one central location. Andrew, there's a whole host of other things. I'm conscious of people's time. What I would like to do for maybe 30 seconds is just show your clients the account settings, because if they do have their account, they can get up and running really quickly. Go to the account settings, get the integration to QuickBooks Online, assuming that you have that set up. Maintain your users, which is the employees, the people in your organization. And when you set up an employee, you will be prompted, you will be prompted to edit their user privileges as well. You can customize that at receiptbank.me address. You can also invite them via that SMS message that I touched on earlier. If you do have things, when you do integrate, that chart of accounts or all those categories are going to come over, the tax codes are going to come over, customers are going to come over from QBO as well, and so too are the projects and locations. If you're not using QuickBooks Online, what you might want to do is you might want to bring in your own chart of accounts, because you may not send your information to a general ledger, but you can bring in your own categories. And that might be against those self-employed categories, for example. So you can bring those in our maintain lists section as well. Whole host of other things that I don't think we can cover in half an hour. But most importantly, go to the help section. And there's some great stuff on getting started down here. So it'll take you through the integration, take you through the mobile app, setting up your users, etc. But Andrew, that's really all I wanted to cover today, unless, as you said, you know the product very well. Was there anything that you wanted me to particularly mention?
Well, I think there's one of the things I want to say is as you said, not everyone is using this with QBO, and I don't think, I love QBO, as everyone knows. We have a large amount of our clients who are still in Excel. I want everyone to know that this product doesn't have to be exclusively used with QBO or with Xero or with one of those out-of-the-box solutions. The tool can still be used on its own to capture receipts as a valid source document for that documentation, for that transparency that we need. And then it can be exported into our CRED manuals people are familiar with. So you can download this as a CSV and then put it into your CRED. We're also going to be doing another follow-up session to this with Ward Blatch from K2E Technologies, and they're specialists in how to use Excel. They are the experts on pivot tables and everything that Excel can do. And we're going to do a whole episode on, okay, now that you've got this data into Receipt Bank, let's get it out of there and manipulate it in different ways to see all the different reports that we can do, even if we're not using QBO. Now, on the QBO side, there are a couple of really powerful tools that I think are worth mentioning, and I'll just mention them here and people can dig into them later. Is you've got that match column. I love that match column. Yeah. Particularly if people have been using QBO for a little while and they're just starting out with Receipt Bank for the very first time. That match column will basically say, hey, you've got a transaction in QuickBooks Online already. I've been able to match it against this transaction that you've uploaded. I don't need to recreate a new one. Let me just attach the image of this receipt to that existing transaction, which I think is beautiful. And then, of course, and I forget the term that you guys call it, but for your rules, like, so you can go into your suppliers and you can say, okay, every time I have this supplier, I want this supplier to be this chart of accounts. I want this to be my automation for this particular supplier, which for things like Tim Hortons and Esso and Shell and all these suppliers that are going to be the same thing over and over and over and over again, can help automate that process. Yes, having that control in here is really powerful when we're talking about fraud prevention, but then there's the whole level of automation that we can do to simplify and really save huge amounts of time. So I know we've gone probably a little bit past our allotted schedule here. And I do appreciate you staying with us, Damien. Do you mind hanging out to see if, I'm not sure if we've got any questions from the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just sort of stop there and say a couple of things as well. Automation, that's essentially machine learning. So it's a great definition machine learning. We've seen how you categorize Tim Hortons, so we remember that. We learn that. There's no reason why we have to do that again. We've seen that you split your Bell Rogers bill, your Bell or your Rogers bill, 50-50. 50% goes to work, 50% goes to personal. Let's just set that up and remember it so we can forget about it moving forward. That's what machine learning is, taking care of those routine transactions. And that's what Andrew's saying. He's going to free up a whole host of time. Look, I think Receipt Bank is a phenomenal tool. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased. And it's a phenomenal automation and time-saving tool. But the one thing that I wanted to stress here today was, while time savings and automation are fantastic, something a little closer to home, which is guarding you against fraud in your business, that's one of the reasons to take this next step. Andrew's got you that free account for 12 months, so get in and put it into practice. Simple protections will stack up to guard against fraud. We can't be 100% protected, but we can put simple protections in place, such as those simple policies and the right technology to help guard against fraud. And then obviously, you know, Andrew, you shared a couple of your experiences. So I know that you'll be able to help your clients with all of those areas for fraud. So they're just my final points before we move to questions, Andrew.
Excellent, thank you. And we do have a couple of quick questions, some of which I can answer on us. I'm not sure if you can see the Q&A.
Yep.
So will Receipt Bank identify duplicate receipts when synchronizing with QBO? Yes, it will. And I've seen that firsthand. Maybe you want to explain how it does that, but I know it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at, again, this is our machine learning in place. We're seeing the same supplier, the same date, the same amount. And so what we do is we flag it for your review. I think in the live version, there's a notes column on the right-hand side, and that's where we're going to flag things that need your attention. So yeah, we'll look at the same supplier, same amount, same date. If it's a bill, same invoice number. We'll flag it to say, this looks like a duplicate. Please review it. And we'll check a duplicate for what's currently in the inbox, but then also what's sitting in the archive, because all of those documents not only sit in QBO, but they also sit in the archive. So if someone has submitted it, say 3 months ago, and we have it, we're going to flag it as a duplicate and identify where exactly that document's currently sitting to bring it to your attention. So yes, we take care of duplicates.
Now, I actually have a question myself before we go into one of the other questions here. I've noticed from my own personal use of the tool that OCRing dates is obviously a problem because everyone uses different date formats. Now, I've found that when people are doing scanning in real time, it's unbelievable accuracy. It seems to be able to know that, okay, it's within the last 3 months, so it must be this format. When we do batch scans, it's still pretty darn good, but it's not quite perfect. And I'm wondering, how is the tool using? Is it saying if it's within this date, within the last 3 months, it must be this format, like day, month, year, as opposed to year, month, day?
Well, what it's doing is it's learning. So it's learning how it handles different suppliers and the different date formats. So slowly but surely the system's learning. But yeah, we're making the assumption that it's been entered within the last 30 days, last 90 days. It's going to be related to a June expense rather than a January expense. But always, that's the beauty of it. We can always come in, we can sort by date. And if there's anything that's way back in 2017, for example, we could immediately review that. OCR, it's not 100%. It does require review, and it does require training and learning. But there's different tools in place to help us identify those. We'll make our best guess. But what you might want to do is you'll want to sort, for example, by user. You'll want to sort by date, sort by supplier. You might even just come in and have a look at these ones that tax hasn't picked up, and might filter those out, for example. So again, we're trying to save time here, but again, it's 99.99%, but it does require a bit of review.
It's unbelievably powerful. It is really, really good. Like it might miss one here and there, but I can tell you, humans miss more than this technology miss, because I can tell you, like, I've had problems in the old school ways of trying to figure out what a date is on a receipt. Is this day or is this month? Like, you know, if it's 11 if it's let's say 3/11, is that March 11th, or is that November 3rd?
Yeah.
And so this technology seems to do an even better job than humans do, and it is pretty darn fast too. I think, I'm not sure what your official turnaround time is, but
Well, it's weird, Andrew. Sometimes the Tim Hortons receipts, we've seen tens of thousands. We do them quickly. The native form PDFs are seconds, but the handwritten tip, the handwritten bill, a new supplier that we haven't seen before, that's going to take a little bit longer. And so it'll just take the system to learn, because we want to make sure we put quality back into the inbox for either your review or your client's review, Andrew. And just as we're on sort of dates, the other side of things is currency. So we get better and better at currency, but obviously the Canadian dollar sign, the US dollar sign, it's the same. Pound sterling, pesos, euros, very easy for us to differentiate between those. So the system does start to learn about the different suppliers and the different vendors, but that will be something that you'll want to check as well if you do have a lot of cross-border transactions.
And I would say, again, it's, arguably better than a human because it's got that machine learning. Because when you look at a bill, it can be very difficult to tell, like you said, whether it's Canadian or US if the address isn't on there. But you guys are remarkably accurate. Again, I guess it's because you have that database that you've seen the supplier before, you've seen the history. The last time I coded it, I said, nope, this isn't Canadian, this is US, and it gets that. And in fact, I think our one of the questions that we have in the Q&A is about currency. It says, when can we have the currency tied to the vendor? When allocating vendor rules, being able to also tag the currency would be a game changer. So I guess this is more a feature request than a Q&A. Right now, RB does not choose the correct one sometimes. Yeah, no, it's not 100% accurate, but like I said, my experience has been pretty darn good. Have you heard that request before? Is it on?
Yeah, we have had it before, and it's on the agenda. So I don't necessarily know a time frame associated with that, but it's certainly we have heard that from our customers, and I know that it is on the list of to-dos. As you all know, probably as business owners, that list of to-dos is long. So I wouldn't want to put a date alongside of it, but we have heard it. We are working towards it. So watch this space. But it's definitely one of those things that partners and our customers have told us about. And as with a lot of technology, we're always improving the functionality and the logic that sits behind the platform.
Right. Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing of any cloud-based application like Receipt Bank is that you are constantly making improvements. I don't have to download and install a new software on my computer. It's just constantly getting better. And I mean, you guys have launched some amazing new features of the tool recently. I mean, obviously the number one thing is being able to fetch. Adding that piece of functionality has been a big, huge leap forward for the product, as well as all the small incremental changes that you're doing to make the product better and better every day, and easier to use. I mean, it's got a great user interface, as people can see from here, very easy to use. We're gonna, like I said, anyone who's interested, we'll have these training sessions. There's the help guide, as you mentioned earlier, but anyone can just pick up this technology and use it. And that's the beauty of it. It's just so simple to use. But on that note, I know we've gone well beyond our allotted time. So I just want to say thank you, Damien, for taking the time out to join us today. Let everyone know that you'll be getting a copy. And if you weren't able to join us, we'll give you a copy of the recorded webinar as well. I guess if you're interested and you're not using QBO, we're going to be doing another session, like I said, with Ward Blatch. I think we were originally scheduled to do it on Thursday, but we might be pushing that back a little bit. And again, thank you, Damien, for sharing your time with us and going a little long.
Andrew, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very kind invitation. And I really hope your clients, your prospective clients, take you up on that offer and start to experience what it's like to work with this technology. And I think more importantly, what it's like to work with your firm. So absolute pleasure, Andrew. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye for now.